Yeah, it's amazing. In the past, it was basically driving at it from like the cultural end, so to speak. And this time it's dealing or approaching it in a completely different fashion,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. It is opening it up for real.
Yeah, good.
Um,
I'll get you re-inspired about the tarot. Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly.
Maybe you've never lost the inspiration about it, but perhaps you've hit a plateau or a plateau in as far as understanding how the tarot can be used beyond the idea of kind of going, well, and I'll have to think about that type of thing.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Because going back to this whole idea, right, that uh, the tarot is nothing more than a way to convey knowledge. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, it's true, if
It is
not
true,
more
right?
than 1,000. Yeah, that's the whole
Right.
thing about it. So, um, so whenever you look at a tarot, the other aspect too is that you can figure out what a person knows as long as you're at or above their level. If you look at someone's tarot that they've come up with, you immediately know their level and station about what they were trying to convey, if anything. Because you can go into a new age bookstore these days and get you got 30, 40, 50 different tarot decks that people have kind of put out there. And
Yes.
not in every case, but in many cases, they're kind of rubbish. They're nonsense. Yeah. They're not conveying anything of true esoteric human evolution oriented value. And it's well, it is what it is. There's no judgment really necessary with it, but it's good to be able to approach something and go, yeah, I see what that's written against, and I can value that, and therefore, I'll buy this tarot deck or whatever. Or you can be like, yeah, I see what this is written against. It's not going to lead me anywhere. I'll move on, pass on. Don't become a collector of tarot decks. If you get the right one, you'll never need another, which is kind of the reason why I do like, for the most part, I do like the tarot of Frown. Um, I'm also working on my own, which you've seen a couple images of.
Right.
And uh, yeah, I mean, there's other ones too, put out by the same organization, kind of, which is the Gemrod and Deer Dragon tarots and those types of things. I don't have copies of those, unfortunately. That's okay. Don't need it. But let's talk about the planets from the standpoint of the pentagram. Okay. A little lopsided, huh? Oh, well, whatever. Whatever. Okay. You okay with that? So
Yes.
let's
Yes.
say white, because this is how it's traditionally done. Red, blue, yellow, and green. And it's kind of alternating pattern. Actually, in some respects, you could turn it 180 degrees counterclockwise and have red at the top. But I'm going to use this one because it still follows the same pattern.
Right.
But okay, so I'll go over it again because I don't know if it's easy to see or not. But white, red, blue, yellow, green, as though you were drawing a pentagram in that same order. Okay.
Right.
Now, which planet goes with white?
Too many crickets. Too many crickets. Jupiter,
Mercury.
Mercury. Now, why Mercury?
Mercury, having to do with the mentality, having to do with the quicksilver, the fast response, the ability to think on your feet. Yeah, that kind of lightness about it. That's white. I think most people would get the red. Which one do you suppose that one is?
Oh, it's got to be Jupiter. Teasing, but
Oh,
anyway, Mars. Mars.
Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mars.
Yes.
Yeah. I know you're
Right.
so in love with Jupiter because of your sign, so we'll get there. They're all Jupiter, damn it. Jupiter's the best of all the astrological signs. But clearly it's Mars. So,
Right.
blue, now's your time to shine. Now you're not going to say it, huh? Jupiter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Jupiter. So, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yellow,
That would be Saturn,
Saturn. Yep. And the one remaining,
Venus.
Venus. Okay, now let's talk about it from the standpoint of things like the Emin and the Fourth Way and some of these other traditions that were influenced by alchemy. Most people don't know that alchemy is, I'm sorry, that the Fourth Way is just nothing more than a rebranding of alchemy. But that's for another lesson, another day. Um, Gurdjieff and Leo and all the rest of them sort of talked about this idea of the five centers. And so at the top, associated with white and associated with thinking, you've got, or yeah, associated with the mind or mentality, you've got the thinking center.
Right.
Okay. Saturn, emotional. Moving for Mars. Sexual for Venus. That one's probably bleeding obvious, isn't it?
Yes.
And instinctive for Jupiter. Okay, so that's all. That's all they were. The astrological symbols that go with these five aspects are alchemical in their origin, alchemical in nature, and the uh, named ones like thinking, emotional, moving, sexual, and instinctive are the rebranded version that originally came from the Fourth Way and then was adopted by the Eamon and so on. But same thing, okay? I don't care what terminology a person uses as long as they understand the actual core and essence of that. So it doesn't matter to me. But then this begins to open up a few curious things because in card number 1 of the tarot, we start at thinking center. You see that? And then we go to the instinctive center. Then we cut across the darn thing over to the emotional center. And then we drop down and we go to moving center. And then finally sexual center and then back to thinking center because it's TAROT, right? It goes back to that one.
Right.
Cycles around through. So you can unlock something by the order in which these are portrayed. And this is where these various symbols above come into play. Because these, I would call these establishments. Establishment 1 and establishment 2. The first establishment has to do with one's religious life, and religious in the context that I had talked about from the cultural, occult, religious, and esoteric. Where have I seen this before? What can I do with it at a higher level? How can I utilize it? Yeah. Not the cultural level of, I can make a motor, right? That sort of thing, but from an esoteric, from the higher aspects of oneself. How can I use this? And so you get this concept here that if you develop your mentality, your instinct, and your emotions, we'll talk about something here, which is quite curious, then you begin to be able to have access to this. And in most systems, or I should say in the Fourth Way and Eamon traditions, they talk about this higher emotional center. Higher emotional center is where the religious life comes from, where that sentiment of being able to connect to something actually comes from. Yeah, higher emotional center allows you to look at something or make a connection with something and have it flow into you. I'll give you an example, right? You look at a tree. If you look at a tree as a normal sleeping individual, then first of all, you're not really aware of yourself at all in the process of it. But you just receive photons, and something in your brain says, goes through the index of labels and goes, tree, and says that. And then you turn into person, car, and rabbit, and sky, and mountain, and so on and so forth. It's just a label maker, label making machine.
Right, right.
That has nothing. That has no content for you. It barely keeps you alive having those types of sense impressions, just enough to keep you from keeling over when you go to bed at night. The higher emotional center, which is represented by the upward and downward triangle. Downward triangle would also be the emotional center. Would it? It would actually have to be this. It would have to be the downward triangle with the bar through it, as shows up in here. You see, you've got this downward triangle with the bar
Right,
from the base of
right.
it going through. That's the lower emotional center, corresponding to the element of earth, by the way.
Yes.
That's the symbol for earth. Yeah. Okay. We know all this, right? This is child's play. We've been through this before, haven't we? I'm being a bit funny with this.
I know.
Okay. So, what you're adding to the lower emotional center is something that goes the other direction. And so now, at a person with a development that corresponds to the higher emotional center development is no longer just the recipient of photons that go into their eyes and become labels. But if they look at a tree, they can then project something of themselves into that tree, which establishes a two-way communication. In a
Right,
situation
right,
like that, the tree sees you as much as you see the tree. Whereas before, it was blind. It couldn't see you. Might have been able to sense you, but it couldn't know the entirety of what you are as an entitized thing. Yeah, and so that's the difference between lower emotion, one-way traffic, and adding that triangle of the higher emotional center, or the other direction of that, to be able to create two-way traffic between something. You get these ideas of Buddha sitting at the base of a giant oak tree, and once he finally had that higher emotional center connection, he understood what the oak tree knew.
yes.
And the oak tree, this is the part that they don't talk about, but the oak tree also understood what he was. So symbiotic relationship going on in there. Yeah. So, and again, it ties into the mentality, the instinct, and the emotion. Now, that's this whole upward portion here. All right, you see instinct, emotion, and mentality. That's the whole upward portion of that pentagram going on in there. Development in those three areas is what will allow you to develop your astral body, which is another term for having that higher emotional center becoming activated. It's actually not that simple. There's two phases of it. Okay, you activate the higher emotional center, and then by this two-way exchange of you and what you interact and deal with, you then accumulate certain types of force in yourself that then crystallizes out into a fully functioning astral body that can live and move independently of you. All right, so it's a bit fuller explanation of that aspect, but for the sake of this, you work on the upper half of your pentagram to get to that level. The completion, obviously, of the pentagram has to do with the lower half of the pentagram, where you get into the higher thinking center or higher mentality or mental body, if you will. So this is where we get into the work, the actual work of, the juggler is juggling with these 7 influences, 5 of which are planetary, having to do with planets of the solar system, and 2 of which have to do with the sun and moon. The sun being the higher emotional center, and the moon being the higher thinking center, or the mental body, and those types of things. So the whole path is lined out exactly how it should occur in a person on their personal development journey. Now we've elevated outside of the realms of you're going to meet a tall, dark stranger type of thing into being 22. And we're only talking about the first one. And again, we can go on and on and on about this, but we're unlocking it from the standpoint of elevating it outside of the octave of divination to the octave of personal development. Because now you have an image that you can look at and go, oh, shit. I had no idea that to get my astral body, to earn, to win, to build my astral body, I have to work on the mentality, the instinct, and the emotion. Well, okay, great. That's all well and good. But then, of course, the next question is, how do I do that? And this is where other esoteric teachings come in. And you'll see as we go through these various cards in the tarot that the answers are in there. And there's a reason why that's card one in this particular deck. It may not be in all decks, but the answers are in there. But we can break it down to kind of a simple aspect of things. Working on the mentality. Now I'm going to dip into a completely different realm. Same thing, but different. Thinking is to do with the element of air. All right? And therein lies the clue as far as how the thinking center of the lower complex, lower aspects, how the thinking center should operate. You don't see air. It accurately transmits exactly what's on the other end of that column of air that you happen to be looking through. It accurately transmits the sounds that are coming from that other end that you're listening to. Yeah, it doesn't try and modify them in any way. You have a vibration going on over here that's doing this number. It's going to come through in its truest form and do the same thing to your eardrum and go, oh, that's a fat lady singing.
Right.
Now it must be over. Yeah. Air has that crystalline, crystal clear quality about it. It's not meant to interfere with things. And so the way towards development of one's mental faculties in the lower aspects of the complex, human complex, being all five centers and brains and whatnot, is really to win that back for yourself. Think about a baby, for example. A baby is a perfect example of how the thinking center should function. When they come out, everything is just wonderment, constant wonderment, right? They haven't begun to put labels for it. Yeah, but that's how you should, except in a grown-up way, that's how you should train your faculties, your mental faculties, I should say, to be able to operate. Look with wonder, question everything.
Yeah.
Look at a tree. Why do I call it a tree? No, it's because someone told me that's a tree, right? Tree by itself, the word or the sound or these types of things has absolutely no meaning outside of the association you make between it. This gives you the permission to be able to look at a thing, we'll call it a tree in this case, because you want to pull yourself away from the label of something and understand what it is that you're actually looking at. What is it in its essence, in its core, in its content, in its radiation, in its reason for being? Have that kind of wonderment. This is how you train your brain to open up again. And what it does is it drops judgment. Someone becomes judgmental, it's because they are applying more labels than necessary on someone or something else. It's really what it boils down to. Their brain is filled with likes and dislikes as opposed to useful and not useful. Okay, right. Easy, isn't it? Just free up, open up that brain life and let it have the permission to be able to explore things anew, explore things from a fresh perspective. Oh, okay. Let's talk about the instinctive life having to do with Jupiter. See, because generally speaking, that's the least tampered with in all of society. least tampered with. The mind is generally messed up in people. The emotions are all over the place in people. Their sexual center is all over the place, right? But their instinct, if they touch a pot burner, yeah, they'll immediately withdraw it, that sort of thing. But it's not so much about that. It's not so much about fear of falling, fear of loud noises, the biological response to having to retract when there's heat. Keep yourself free from danger. That's really the lower half of the instinctive center. This part down here that deals with all that. And when you walk into a room, what happens instinctively is your instinctive center will go sharp edge, you know, creepy person. It begins to like scout out and look
Yep.
for things that might harm your physical complex. Go make eye contact. These types of things. It does that for you. But the other aspect of the instinctive center that most people kind of ignore or the very best don't listen to very well has to do with ecologies. Not creating ecologies, but having that kind of sense about what's around oneself. What is the timing of the day? What's the frequency of the day? If you were to pick a color that stands out most vibrantly for that day, for example, take yourself on a walk, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, that violet, or those lilacs are especially attractive today. It may not mean that that's what the planet's doing, but your relationship to things begins to change from an instinctive level. And that's when you begin to enter the realms of, people say, I have an instinct, I've got an instinct about that person. I've got an intuition about that person. This is really the realms of intuition. You want to be able to give your instinctive life permission to be able to communicate to you what it knows that you can't determine with your five senses alone. Those types of things. Again, it's not a value judgment. It's not like and dislike. It's increasing one's sensitivity. We've talked about, there's all kinds of ways to increase one's sensitivity. Everything from being able to, sense things, kind of what's the radiation coming off of this, to if the phone rings, before you look at it, you go, that's Pierce calling me, or whoever, that's my buddy, whatever the case might be, or it's work, or begin to develop this sort of intuition or instinct to really teach your instinctive center that it's okay to reach out, and also it's okay to communicate with you those things that it knows. And the reason why is because you're going to need clear thought, and you're going to need very strong instinct. Got a point. If I'm pointing, got a point. You're going to need very strong instincts.
Yeah.
To be able to do this kind of work of when you get this astral body, that type of thing. Okay. Now, Saturn, emotions. I was wrong here. Yeah. Sorry. Let me correct this. And if I said it wrong earlier, I'll correct it now. I'm not sure if I did or not, but that would actually be a downward pointing triangle having to do with the element of water. The emotional center is downward pointing triangle having to do with earth. Now here's the clue. Here's the clue with the relationship between earth and emotional center, is that people's emotions tend to be turbulent, like an earthquake, like a storm, like a volcano, like all of these things that the earth can do, but generally causes massive amounts of destruction, just like people when they're in an emotional outrage.
Right.
Emotional outbursts cause earthquakes and volcanoes in their own personal life and those of the ones around them. But earth in its natural state has to do with stability, has to do with strength, has to do with solidarity, these types of things. You can build something on the earth because you generally expect that it's going to be able to continue to keep these qualities intact, don't you? Right? You don't build a house on Earth and then expect that an earthquake's going to come up and reduce the whole thing to rubble. This is how you should treat your emotional life. Just like you should treat your mental life as air, your instinctive life as water, meaning it's cooling, it's got an aspect of reinvigoration to it, but it's also regulating. Yeah, the water. It balances things out. It takes away toxins, all this sort of thing. The emotional life should be stable, solid, easy, smooth running, something you can build something upon, something that someone else can trust to build something upon as well. Can people in your life trust you that you're going to be stable, that your emotional life is a bedrock for them to build something upon? Can the way trust you and go, if I impart this kind of wisdom on this person, is it going to end up as a pile of rubble, or are they going to continue to expand and build and grow on this? Yeah, just like that. That's really what it's about. Okay, so there you go. There's those three planets. Of course, air. Air is that symbol in alchemical terms, isn't it? Right. Once you do that and get that aspect, this white, blue, and yellow aspect together in oneself, and you can then move on, according to card 1 of the Frown Tarot anyway. And then you begin to work on the moving center, which is that symbol, which is fire. Okay. We don't have one for Venus because it's a different system, but you begin to work on the moving center. Now, this has to do with things like your discipline in yourself. This symbol is more modern. What it represents is the shield and the spear of Ares, the god of war. But in its original term, it was actually just the opposite of Venus. It used to look like that. That's another symbol for Mars. Aries, I should say. Well, both. But the moving center has to deal with one's habitual life, for example. Has to do with one's strength to be able to persevere, to be able to endure, to be able to, like a Roman soldier on a battlefield, march for 100 miles, laden down, having that kind of long view of what the objective is, that discipline, the armor of oneself, the armor of one's inner and outer lives to be able to accomplish the great work, to utilize a term from alchemy. It also has to do with the regulation of habits, the habitual life, from the standpoint of whether it's useful, not useful, or benign. You might have habits that are actually incredibly useful to you, like, for example, what I put into my moving center about being able to do a tarot reading without any cards. Have a person just like, oh, it's the best tarot reading I've ever had. That's a moving center function because I put it there by repetition. Did so many of these that I'm like, I don't need the cards anymore. I know what it's going to come out as. Yeah. Or I can engineer what it should come out as to help this individual. That's a higher perspective of things. All right. Okay. So working on the Martian aspect of yourself, or the Mars moving, Jupiter, or not Jupiter, but Aries, all these types of things. And then they do have a symbol in alchemy for this, but it's the plus sign, okay? Because they had, they would draw this symbol this way. They'd have hot and cold, wet and dry, and they'd have fire, which is the combination of hot and dry. They'd have earth, which is the combination of dry and cold. They'd have water, which is wet and cold, and they would have air, which is wet wet and warm. Yeah, they would have those. But then they spoke about the balance of all those being the prima materia, the prime, the first matter, or at the end of it, when these four forces come together in the right kind of balance, um, it would create the philosopher's stone, which you could equate to this aspect here, this Mercur Venusian aspect. And the reason why it is such in Vedic and Chinese cosmology, they call it wood or life or these types of things. And if you think about the aspect of life, life can only be maintained and sustained so long as the air, earth, water, and fire aspects are all in place. The breathing, being the air aspect, the metabolism being the fire aspect, the regulatory systems being the water aspect, and of course the physical structure being the earth aspect. If those are all in harmony, then something, the fifth element, the penultimate aspect of it, fifth element, penultimate aspect, can come out of that, which is life. We've talked about before that rods are transmissive, positive, male, thrusting, those types of things. Cones or circles are receptive, feminine, all these types of things. Yeah, this kind of two balances in nature. If you've got a tree in half, you see not only is it growing up in the form of a rod, but it's also spiraling outward as it does, creating these kind of waves outward as it does. That's the idea behind life, is this balance between two different forces coming together. If one of them's out of balance, you don't live, as is evidenced by the fact that if you stop breathing, you got about 3 to 5 minutes before you're dead, right? Air gets removed from the complex and it's done. You stop your metabolism, same result happens. You don't have a body, well, that's pretty bleeding obvious, isn't it? There's nothing to inhabit. Yeah? And so it's not so much once you get these two factors in balance that then you come up with a mental body, which in this aspect is called the cosmic triangle. Other people might even call it cosmic consciousness, but it's the mental body. We'll just call it that blue triangle in the Frown Strong card 1 diagram. What it really is the fact that you now have your pentagram in perfect working alignment. Right. That's also why, Venus, they even used to call sexually transmitted diseases venereal disease because they thought it comes from Venus, the god of love and sexuality and intimacy and all these types of things. Of course, the color green going with it, simply because trees and bushes and all of these types of things, the most basic organic life on the planet is the marriage of blue and yellow, which is green. Curious too, isn't it? Marriage of blue and yellow converging on green. But it's having this pentagrammic alignment in oneself where everything is as it should be. Then the mental body can kind of come out of that. And, curiously enough, we talked about the Viscontis and the Sforzas earlier being one of the earliest developers of the tarot, along with the Medicis. And the Visconti emblem or standard shield, these types of things, was a spiraling dragon with its mouth open and a human coming out of the top of it. This talks about the birth of something coming out of the dragon, obviously representing that, and the birth of kind of a higher life form, the human life form, protruding out of the mouth of that dragon. It's a very powerful symbol. Makes you want to be a Visconti. Maybe. There's a lot of other nonsense too, but yeah. So all that in one card. Like I said, hours and hours and hours of lessons in there. We didn't go into anything having to do with like the silver backdrop, which speaks to the not only the radiation, he's not producing it, by the way. It's in the background, which speaks more to the idea that it is the silver vortex in the universe, or a universal silver vortex. I would expect he would generate platinum from there, a platinum condition at the very least. You know, color of his tunic, the belt is very significant, being black and green. Trousers, very significant in their color. All these types of things we didn't go into, including the stance that he maintains. This juggling kind of thing. You notice the right hand's a bit higher than the lower. Good reason for it. It's not the same, by the way, as this alpha stance that the magician is in. It has a different type of meaning to it. Yeah, but yeah. Think you're on mute, but I'll go ahead and advise you to take it off of mute and then let me know where you're at with this.
Doing very well. Very, very well.
Go. Yeah, there you go. Good.
Yeah.
There's a lot in it, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Yes, there
Never
is.
looked at card number 1 that way before, right?
Yeah, not with the symbology. No, never have. At least
Well, it was
not
always
in
kind
this
of
depth.
glossed over, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
like one or two lines in the kind of pamphlet that comes with it, or in the
Yes.
longer version of the booklet that's like, these are the forces that the juggler deals with. But
Right.
no one ever
Right.
said, yeah, these are the forces. These are the forces the juggler is dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good. Yeah. What else occurs to you with this?
PFM.
BFN.
PFM.
EFM.
Pure fucking magic.
PFM. Okay. Papa Foxtrot Mike. Got it. Fucking magic. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely amazing. It is so wonderful. It's it is whether you're following, alchemy, or it's the I forgot the name of the word. It's like analogies. There's symbology. There's it's all hidden, if that makes sense. And unless you have the assemblies or the it, people look at the tarot cards and they think they know what it is, if that makes sense. And unless you have the proper glasses on, as an example, you're not going to be unlocking it. You're not going to be opening it up. So when I did tarot readings in the past, people have these preconceived ideas of what that card is and what that symbol is and so forth. And it's like they're going off to the right or to the left and not seeing really what's going on, if that makes sense. It's like the reading the Bible or whatever, the alchemy, where there's so much, not analogy, there's another word, I can't think of it right now. It's
perhaps metaphor, but yeah.
Yeah, it's metaphors, the metaphorical. The whole metaphor, analogy, symbology. It's funny because most people are not awake to that, if that makes sense. And just going into the symbology of this right here, let alone the other, the rest of the card.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could have done any card as long as it was written against something from the standard of value that a human can get to.
Yes.
Could have done any card in any deck if it has a criteria from which it was manufactured.
Right.
As an evolutionary pulse to it. Not married to the tarot, or I mean to the tarot of Frown. Uh, I mean, people have come up with one for the I Ching, the Chinese rods and divination, all that type of stuff. They've got a tarot deck for that. Why not? Of course, yeah. That's written against the standard of human evolution for sure. Yeah, good. Okay. All right. We've made it.
Yeah.
About at the 2 hour mark. We're a little bit shy of it, but that's okay. I think I'm going to leave it here. Leave a few things for you to ponder and chew on, and hopefully leave you with a different appreciation and approach to what you can do with the tarot, both from the standpoint of understanding your own direction and path, along with what you can do for someone else with the tarot. Because if you get that kind of connection to the tarot, you can actually help bring the right kinds of influences in for that person for the maximum outcome for their life. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you've seen a runway for an airplane when it lands, right?
Sure.
That's exactly this card.
Yeah.
If you look at it, if you see it, the way you've opened this up, it's like we are not aware of the help at hand, or the so once again, this comes back to the preconceived ideas and the way we were brought up to understand things, to believe things, to what am I trying to say? So basically, this is like a runway. It's like you have the guardrails. Now you start to see not guardrails, but you start to see the rails. You see the assistance. You see the help. You see the path that does that make sense? Things start to open up to where you see. Yeah, it's like being in a. You read about it in different forms and fashions and such, where the pathway opens up. Da Vinci series in the movie. You start to see it. There's all these markers, and you just need to learn how to read them, how to understand them.
Yeah.
And looking at and so basically reapplying it to the card right now is looking at the 5 different symbols for the planets, and the other 2 symbols.
You wouldn't know that had you not known a little bit of alchemy, right? You would have looked at
exactly.
You actually would have looked at these symbols probably and said, why are there only 5 of the 12 astrological signs represented within it?
Very much, yes.
And it comes from a different frequency. Astrology, I mean, you can definitely do a tarot based on astrology, although you don't really need to because it already is a tarot. But you could definitely do that. But unless you have the platform upon which to build this type of knowledge and go, oh, right, this is actually coming from an alchemical foundation, you're probably going to approach it in a way that's not so useful in many cases.
See, and that's where I also it'd been interesting to have another individual with us along this journey today that did not have somewhat of an alchemical understanding. If that makes sense, to see if they were able to, well, not if they were able to, but to see them understanding it.
Yeah, well, there's got to be some what we used to call and probably still should call groundwork.
Yes.
There's certain territories that ultimately need to be worked into as foundational to be able to build this kind of intelligence upon. I don't mean intelligence as in cultural intelligence.
Exactly. There's I still call it groundwork. Without the groundwork, there's no platform to build up an understanding of.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I agree. It's still, I still call it groundwork. I still view it as groundwork. You need to do the groundwork. You have to go through just like the military, basic training. You have to build a foundation upon which you can build, or which the military in this case, or in this analogy, can build upon. Same with this work, is you have to have a foundation upon which to build from. That's why I thought it would be really it'd have been unique to have someone here that does not have that not background, but that understanding or understandings. Um,
It's
that,
okay because
no, it is.
just given given the amount of traffic the site does get, thousands of people will eventually watch this, and maybe they'll chime in the comments as far as to your question. So we'll see. But yeah, now thousands of people. I think we're up to, well, not thousands, I should say. What was it, 1.6 thousand or 5,000 or whatever views on videos like this. So yeah, let's see. Let's just wait and see who chimes in the comments and what they have to say about it. Hopefully, it's beneficial for a larger audience at some point in time.
I think I hope that people will see this as basically there's an if as somebody's watching this video in this case right today, right, I hope that they realize the doors that have been opened, and that they can go through those doors and open up worlds up on worlds, if that makes sense. It's not just about the juggler card one, but this actually opens up into so many different territories, so many different worlds unto itself.
Yeah, it's all interconnected. That's the thing. It's all interconnected.
Exactly.
There's a million ways to approach it. It just happened to be that these alchemical symbols were in card one, so that's what I had to run with. And of course,
Exactly.
I've spent the last 30 years working into things like this with respect to alchemy and the esoteric and occult and unseen worlds and those sorts of things. So
exactly.
Good. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap it. Okay, let's give it a wrap. And yeah, you and I can chat later on in the week and take it further. All right.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say real quick is that I've gotten quite the insight, quite a different view of the juggler. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Very happy to hear that. All right.
All right.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.